Hello. We are excited to be in summer and to be living abundantly. And we are excited to bring you the best of the Sister Covenant. If you have a favorite podcast from 2020, 21, or 22 that you want to see, just let us know. Enjoy our review during the summer. Get ready for what's going to come in the fall. And we will see you on the Sister Covenant. We're taking a hiatus, but we remain relevant, vigilant, masked, and vaccinated during the summer so we can enjoy our best lives with our family and friends. Enjoy your summer. Great Sunday morning and welcome to the 20th podcast of the Sister Covenant. Now, I must be honest with you. This is not Sunday morning for me. This is part 2 of this very important dialogue around the isms and us taking back our power against all of the isms: sexism, colorism, classism, racism. And we know that what we've experienced over the last 15 months of pandemic, as well as civil awareness in this country, didn't just start 15 months ago. So we're having the conversations so we can move the needle collectively in this space. But before we get to our amazing guests from 2 weeks ago, let's just thank you. Thank you for being with us for the last 9 months of the Sister Covenant. And thank you for continuing to support the Sister Covenant in purchasing your beautiful, beautiful, beautiful Sister Covenant apparel. If you have not made your purchase, it is not too late to go to the sistercovenant.com and purchase that beautiful, beautiful apparel. And as you know, for every $100 that you invest, it is an investment in a young person through UNCF. We will send $10 directly to that charitable organization. Although we are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, we are still in the middle of some unparalleled time, and we want to help our young people in any emergency situation that they are in. So giving to UNCF definitely helps those students, and a mind is a terrible thing to waste. So we're going to start our conversation. I want to share, had an opportunity to sit down, as you know, with Dr. Mai, who is an educator in the Duval County Public School systems for over 30 years, as well as a community advocate around the importance of collaboration and making a difference in our local communities as well as our country around all people being equitable and equal in this space. Want to share part 2 of that conversation now. Dr. Mai, we have been at this game for a little while. You've been in the community and in the trenches for some 30 years, trying to make this community better. But how do we continue to model what you have put forth and what I'm doing here with the Sister Covenant for our young people? I affectionately call them the youngins. How do we continue to model what we're doing so we can pass that baton on?
So modeling is great, but then space has to be have to be graciously given. And it's not just about given. We have to be purposely inviting wherever we are. And I would look to the city. I look to the organization. I look to schools, institutions, to be very, very consciously inviting and purposely doing things that, that involve different voices. And I think that when we do it like that, we are really the practitioner of true diversity, inclusiveness. As I said at the beginning, at some point with the concept of including everyone. So we have to really look at it. And for me, over the years, this is what I do. I will get involved. And then what happens is, if I am invited to somewhere, and if I am not the right voice for it, I will ask, so that perhaps I can get you or the organization or institution a better person that can represent what they want. But the key is, if we are there, look around, don't just sit down, look around, observe the actors to see whether or not, everyone is involved here. It's supposed to be the representation of the community. Ask. And I know that I have been viewed as a pain in the behind sometimes. Why are you always asking these questions about this? And so, but ask. But do it kind of in a way that, okay, I'm not trying to be annoying here. I am just asking the question, can you put someone there? If you are talking about health, if you are talking about mental health, do you know that the Southeast Asian, members of our society here experience a whole bunch of that? Consider them being, refugees, especially in the mid 1970s up to the early 1990s. They were admitted here, because of the refugee status, like I was, and they had gone through war-torn times, years of civil war in their own country, years of starvation. And then if you are looking at mental health, have you really looked at the African members who came from Ghana, Ethiopia? Did you look at the, the Haitian community members? Something like that. Those are the real things that we need to look at. Look at the city. Are you, do you have enough? Look at your staff, look at your board members. Are they really representing what the city stand for or look like? Ask those questions. And if they don't answer you, step back, go away. You don't need to be involved in those places who don't want to hear you. If they don't want you, don't have to be there. And so that's something that I learned to practice. And if those communities, those organizations are not listening, not seeing it, then it's their loss. It's their loss. I will step away. I'm not going to be emotionally involved and to highlight that. And city commissions, city boards are notorious of just selecting members that are very safe to pick, and then, organizations, if you are involved in it and they look kind of, diverse, are they carrying a conversation? Is there, are the items on their agenda really representing your own end, why you were there to begin with, or did they just use you as a face that looked different to match the diversity, number so that they can get the grant. No policies so that you can reasonably talk about these things without showing anger, without being irrational about it, right? And so to me, I think that examining organizations, our city levels, our institution, the place where we work, if they don't give you a leadership role, in my case, sometimes when I started a long time ago, go out into the community, get involved, help, do whatever it is you get in. You don't have to be a leader. Gradually, if you are consistent, if you are working for a larger cause and always improve, society, our community, people will take notice. People will recognize you, but just keep on going. Wear your heels to the ground. Sometimes you may have to buy your new shoes. Figuratively speaking, that is, get different shoes, wear different shoes for different formats, for different platforms, so that you can wear them comfortably and speak comfortably in your own skin, in your own persona that day. For what? For the betterment of our community. And it's okay. It's okay if they don't invite you next time, and that's perfectly okay. Feel comfortable being rejected sometimes, feeling unwanted sometimes. It's all right. It's part of life. It's never is perfect. And wear your persona very well, and it starts within your hearts, within your guts, because that's your integrity. That's your own identity. You can't change that. People can't change that for you. And so if they keep on inviting you, you're doing okay. And then get other people, hook your arms with other people and start marching forward. Change your shoes sometimes.
And that's spot on. That's why we're having this conversation, and it cannot be a one and done. It has to be continuous. We have to bring in other backgrounds, our brown sisters from our Hispanic and Latino communities, our Indian communities, certainly our Black sisters, and just like in the Asian American community, our Black sisters don't all come from Africa. Some of them come from the Caribbean. Some of them come from we all arrive at the same time to push each of us and lift us as we move forward. And I think a good indicator of that was this past fall when we all came together to elect a woman of color,
yes,
on the ticket as the vice president, a woman who is of Black culture and from African American roots, but also an Asian American woman.
Yes.
How do you feel? I know how I feel, because when I see her, I see me. How do you feel in this moment in time, knowing we have that as our propeller, if you will?
I think about how this past, the previous administration, those 4 years, the race, was used in a way to benefit certain, especially his upcoming election, re-election, and narratives. And then at the end of all the racial heartaches, the killing of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and many other ones that we cannot just label. And then to coming to this moment, right? We have a vice president that represents a woman and part Asian like me, and then half, African American, Black like you, or all my friends or anyone else. And I feel proud that in this time in the history of the United States, we have something that we can speak for and about. And it is for the advancement of our country. It is for the harmony. It is for the peace and the joy of this country. It is not time to tear down, to say that, oh, you know, this is time that that we have to be strong for the white movement or anything like that, or that we are tearing down, or our groups are tearing down the white. It is not that at all. And somehow that got into the mainstream media, the mainstream conversation. That is about, you know, it is not. It is where, you know, our politics, our economy, our politics, it's about education. It's about everything about this country. It's about the peoples of this country. And so I am very, very proud. I'm very, very proud at this moment to move forward, to work with various groups, to always project what the possibilities this country can be for everyone, for people like me that came here 39 years ago. Or, you know, or for the people that who gone so long before me, and that we are from this wonderful country where democracy is at its greatest, the best exemplar there is in the world, right? So we got to carry that torch. And our community, you know, we all pitch in, we all do something for the community. It's not for ourselves. It's not for us. It's for our family. It's for our schools. It's for our community. It's for our city, for our state, and our country. And I love that.
You just said that. Amen is what I have to say to that. And in the words of Shirley Chisholm, bring your own folding chair. Bring your own folding chair. Dr. Mai, you are a jewel. Thank you, my new
Thank
friend.
you so much, Miss Pat. Thank you. Thank you.
So, Dr. Allen, you just touched on something else, and we don't have enough time. We never will. But classism is another piece to this conversation. So when we have seen some of the things that have played out even most recently politically, and we have real dialogue with our friends that look just like us, but they talk about, I don't want to lose some of where I am because I've worked too hard for this. Is that classism? Is that, privilege? What is that? And am I going to really genuinely have the conversations to get this person or that person in the door? Because I enjoy being the only in the lunchroom. I enjoy being the only in the boardroom or the conference room. Does this make sense what I'm asking without, and maybe I need to just say it. I'm the only woman of color. I'm the only Black female in my role or in my company or in this space. I may like it that way. Is that classism? What is that?
That is a scarcity mindset, and it will trip us up every time. When I talked about power just a few minutes ago, and I said it's up to us to combine power. I don't like the idea of shared power because it makes it seem like power is finite. There's only so much to go around, and that contributes to this scarcity mindset. There is more than enough to go around. There are more positions, there's more money, there is more stature, there is more, you name it, there's more of it. But if we continue to operate on this idea that there's not enough and I need to be the only one to protect myself, that's just a scarcity mindset. And we can't afford to have that. We are by nature collectivist people, meaning whatever I have, I share abundantly because we share with each other. And that's just how we interact with each other. That individualism will inevitably take us out if we don't recognize it and call it out for what it is. The collective is how we survive. We can't go in it with this scarcity mindset, thinking that we're the only one. And because just as soon as one of us is gone, they'll find someone else. And so, I feel very passionately about that. The idea we need to kind of tear down this idea of self. That's not the way we survive as people.
So what do you see, Dr. Lanor, in this space? What have you come in contact with?
Yeah, so as a Black woman who throughout probably most of my life at this point have been one of the few in the room, right? So even at the University of Missouri, there's about 2,000 faculty members. Roughly 40 of us are Black. And so when you think about that, and you hear conversations of people talking about, and really at this intersection of classism, I would say, is this ideal of politics of respectability. So to Kim's point about the scarcity ideal, and I think with classism, it's also that link to politics of respectability in that people of color, especially those who are educated, can sometimes look down upon, think about the others as the others, and they don't want them to be part of the group, right? And because of that, and that intersection, that it again damages all of us, right? Racism doesn't just impact people of color, it definitely impacts White people too. And so I think when we kind of think, especially as people of color, when we think of the intersections of race and classism and this politics of respectability ideal that a Black woman shouldn't go out there with her hair looking a certain kind of way. All of these ideals that have happened and have been passed on from generation to generation, and really is tied to white supremacy and how Black people should behave, that we are not making progress that way. And that we really do need everyone on board in the sense that, you can't be so proud about your tokenism if you're not reaching back and helping to bring other people forward, right? And that's one of the things that I say even for my graduate students. If I'm not somehow bringing Black graduate students into the graduate program and having them to graduate with their PhDs, what am I really doing, right? And I think we all have to kind of have that mindset, and that's the way that we make changes in our circles, which in turn it makes changes in our institutions. Is that that tokenism, scarcity ideal is not going to work if we're really trying to make significant change and change the country and the world more broadly.
So, ladies, critical race theory. We've heard that academic term quite a bit recently. It's not new, but the theory of it isn't new, but that term is kind of new, or I'm just hearing it. What is that, first of all? And then how does that play into the other lens that says cancel culture? You're just wanting to cancel culture. How do they intersect? Or talk to us a little bit about both. Dr. Holcomb, what you're smiling. So what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I'm smiling since I do a lot of trainings on racial trauma. And so this comes up quite a bit with, agencies being scared to hire me and being very concerned about what I'm going to talk about because of this fear of critical race theory. So my understanding of the theory is that, it originated within the study of law. And basically, it's like what we've been talking about today. It's really not this like scary theory or a theory that everyone's been like demonizing. it's really this idea that we have intersections, and looking at the political intersection, the laws, the culture, whatever, and how they all intersect based on racism, and how race plays a role in all of the policies that we have in this country. And so it's just looking at that. It's just looking at the policies and how racism is embedded within them. And so I think the fear, one, I think a lot of people don't know what it is, and they are, politicizing it and weaponizing it right now to create fear. I think it's very comical that it's this belief that critical race theory is just widely used and taught in an education curriculum, because that's just not the case. I think what the fear is that we will start being honest about our history. I think critical race theory, they're not really scared about the theory per se, because people don't know what it is. I think they're afraid of the truth. They're afraid of us having conversations like we're having today. They're afraid of us educating our young people about the racist history of this country, and how it is impacting our lives today still. And so the fear, right, the underlying fear of white supremacy and of racism is that the white community will no longer be in control. And so this thought that we would then teach our young children about racism would then overthrow the white community, I think, is the underlying fear. But that's not the case. I think what we are advocating for, educators are advocating for, just people of color are advocating for, is honesty, is truth, is vulnerability, is our stories being told and being seen accurately, our history being reflected accurately, and for the next generation to have a voice and a say in how we treat people, right? And so that we can start doing something different. And I think that change is what's scary. And that's why we are now demonizing critical race theory, because we're afraid of change. We're afraid of vulnerability. And it just comes down to us being afraid of facing the truth, because the truth is uncomfortable.
Isn't it just a left theory? And aren't you just trying to cancel culture?
Yes, right. The leftist agenda trying to cancel culture. I think cancel culture is actually pretty comical to me. It's comical to me because from a colonialism idea, that colonialism is the original cancel culture. What Dr. Allen was saying, through the enslavement of Africans, that was cancel culture. The whole goal of white supremacy is to cancel everybody's culture, to make everybody ascribe to this ideal of whiteness and what that looks like and that value. And so anything else being called cancel culture is kind of quite comical to me. But no, critical race theory is absolutely not cancel culture. It is actually talking about our culture, talking about the culture of America, and talking about the history of America in a real way for the first time for many of us. Because I don't know about the ladies in this room, but I know that I grew up here and I learned the education that was taught here, and lots of pieces were missing. Lots of pieces of our stories are missing. And I think critical race theory, as just a theory, is trying to make sure that we integrate all of the pieces of our stories.
So we just celebrated Juneteenth, and I can't tell you how many people, Black and white, that said, I didn't know about it. I have to be honest. I learned of Juneteenth probably 20 years ago, but really never have celebrated it like I do 4th of July. So when we talk about our history, just picking and choosing what we know about. So talk to anybody else. You got thoughts around?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that, right? The original cancel culture is America, in that we celebrate July 4th, which is coming up, when our ancestors weren't free, right? Imagine that. Whose culture has been canceled? And so I really do think it's fear. And critical race theory is the big boogeyman of fear, because people are uncomfortable, and in part because they're finding out a whole lot of new information, right? The Tulsa massacre, which most of America had no clue about. And even, so I teach a course on Black families, and a lot of these conversations happen within this class, and students are shocked. Black students, white students, other students of color are shocked at the history that they have no clue about. The cancel culture that has happened in American history, the cancel culture that has happened in world history. And so I really do say to folks who, I mean, my work looks at critical race theory. I use that even in my own research, and I say that it is a fear mentality that's really making folks freak out. But what the purpose of critical race, and even just really thinking about the role of race in how we understand each other, how we understand our place in America and in the world, is so important, because then you're able to see the value of Juneteenth, right? And why it should have been a national holiday a long time ago. Then you're able to see the value of all of the events that have happened around America. Then you're able to understand, when we talk about generational wealth, or really generational poverty, that it just didn't happen overnight because someone had trouble getting a job because of racism. That it was really, when you think about the wealth transfers and redlining in communities, and so all of that, right, is understood, and really better understood by understanding the role of race that race has played in America and really around the globe. And so I when it comes to conversations about critical race theory, even just talking about race, and I'm in the Midwest in Missouri, and Lord knows that the University of Missouri has had a whole lot of things going on when it comes to race and racial conversations. But I say that we should make sure that we keep up the conversations and keep these conversations going, because the other side will continue to fight against this, but we need to continue to tell the truth.
Well, we won't even talk about the fact that our previous president takes responsibility for the country being educated on Juneteenth. So we're going to move past that. We're going to move to Dr. Allen. I know you've done some work around just these conversations, again, the race cards and Juneteenth, just last week in that conversation, Dr. Lanor, you talked about the Tulsa massacre, and we had a dear friend of mine, Michelle Anderson, come back in Black History Month and talk about that situation. And we've heard reparations, we've heard that term over the years. And with Tulsa, if there was ever any conversation around reparations, you know, so how we've talked about the ills, we've talked about the isms, we still got to talk about sexism, Dr. Lanor. I want to get there. But how do we come up with conversations to heal, solutions? I don't know if solutions is the right word, Dr. Allen. What am I looking for? What word am I looking for?
Reconciliation.
Okay, talk about, tell us what we need to do, Dr.
Allen. I always go to starting with the self. And I'm looking at Dr. Holcomb, especially because going to a therapist can really help uncover things that you didn't realize were there. And I think in order for you to ever be in right relationship with others, you have to be willing to be honest with yourself first and be willing to address, say things out loud to yourself that you think in the back of your mind, and really explore where that comes from. One of the things, just real quick, about critical race theory is this idea of critiquing, right? Critiquing the way in which our country was structured, and how it has an impact, and how it disenfranchised or left some others in disarray, some groups in disarray. I would encourage us to critique ourselves, challenge some of the things that we've learned growing up. All of us have learned some things in our households growing up in our families that are not cool now, that are not okay now. How do we unlearn that? How do we go back? How do we make sure we don't pass those things forward? And what does it really look like to go through a process where we have to call out those things that are, we don't talk about it. They're under the rug. They stay hidden. It's just one of those things that's taboo. How do we surface those things and work them out within ourselves, but then make connections with people who have the lived experiences that we want to get to know, or we want to get to understand, and learning from them and learning from each other, right? It's mutual. It should be a mutually beneficial relationship, and not just to check a box. Oh, I got a Black friend, I got an Asian friend, I got a Hispanic or Latinx friend. No, like really seek out genuine relationships with people so that you can try and understand their experiences and their perspectives and their backgrounds and where they come from. One of the events we hosted last night, we had a community forum called "When Is It Safe to Be Asian?" And we had a panel of Asian, American, Pacific Islanders on that panel. And one of the panelists said, we got to do a good job of opening up. We need to open up and invite people into our spaces, as well as, feel comfortable to reach out, right? But what does it look like to really open oneself or one's group up and invite people in? That requires some graciousness. That requires some forgiving. That requires some understanding of where people are. We say that people are on a journey to understanding the impacts of race and racism in our society. How do we meet people where they are to bring them along if they want to be brought along? Everybody doesn't want to get on the train, and that's okay. But for those who do want to, how do we extend an invitation? How do we open up? What does it look like to create a gracious space for those folks, for those relationships to blossom, so that we can become more aware of each other and reconcile our past, right? We can't ignore it. We don't ignore it. We talk about it. We critique it. We say ouch when it hurts, but we keep moving forward together and not being afraid of that process.
Dr. Allen, those conversations are so powerful. I had the opportunity to sit in on that conversation. When is it okay, or, you know, you're not afraid to be Asian in this country. And we've seen what has transpired recently. And just some of the comments, I mean, everything from the young folks being embarrassed about the food that they eat and not wanting their friends to smell them because they smell like the food that is prepared in the home, and that becomes a topic of discrimination or concern. It's huge, again, and making it okay to be different. I think for me, the vision of this conversation was to point out the isms, make sure people understand they are real. Just because you may not see it because it's not your lens that you look through, they really are real. They happen external and internal. And until we own it and talk about it, they're not going to go away. They don't just die out. They perpetuate themselves. Dr. Lanor, sexism. You deal with sexual behaviors as it relates to all of this very heavy subject matter, and especially as it relates to our younger population, as I like to affectionately call them, the youngins. Talk to us a little bit about the intersection of sexism and racism and colorism, and we're in this space of the Me Too movement.
Yeah, and actually, I think the Me Too movement is a perfect example of why, say, critical race theory matters. Because when we think about the Me Too movement, when we think about how it became a thing, who were the women who were initially the face of the Me Too movement, that the intersections of racism that happen within and it's continuing to happen within the Me Too movement is really powerful, right? Because when you really think about the experiences of women, if we focus on America, Black women are the most likely to be harassed, raped, experience sexual violence. And so disproportionately, when you look at the numbers, right? And so when we're talking about the Me Too movement, and we rarely see women of color as part of those conversations, that is how the intersection of these things happen. And that's why it's important to have these conversations, right? Or even when we think of the feminist movement and who was left out of that conversation, right? And so I would encourage the audience that when you're thinking about all of these isms, please don't look at them in isolation, and that it really is the intersections of people's experiences that you really do see how they go and move through life, and it matters. And so actually in one of my research projects, as I was talking about kind of sexual behavior and talking about it from the perspective of racism, but also colorism, the way that, say, risky sex may play out and colorism plays a role in it is even when it comes to picking partners or people to have sex with, right? And that we found in some of my work that darker skinned women, and not just Black women, darker skinned women of color can oftentimes feel like they don't have They can't find a partner. It's harder to find a partner. And so when it comes to things like sexual behavior, they're more likely to take risk in terms of maybe not using a condom because you don't want that potential partner to think something different about you. And so really when it comes down to kind of thinking about all of these issues, and most importantly, how do we create spaces for healing and spaces for really changing people's ideals and attitudes towards these things and outcomes, that we really do have to understand all of these issues through the prism of intersectionality. And critical race is a significant part of understanding intersectionality.
So ladies, how do we leave this conversation? How do we leave it better than we began it? How do we perpetuate it? What are your suggestions? We all have centers of influence. How do we own this and keep it moving forward? I'll start with you, Dr. Allen.
I think this is me. I think the first place you start is talk to your mama or whoever that female figure is in your life, some other woman who across generation, and try and identify where some of these things land with them and arrive at how those things have shaped you as an individual, and in turn, how have those things shaped how you influence women around you, whether it's your children, godchildren, nieces, nephews, etc. But I think starting that conversation with people you trust, particularly your family, will help you start to unpack. And then this is a plug for Jamila. I think you go and you see a therapist next. I think you stay in contact with a therapist, because I had a friend of mine say, who's a recovering alcoholic, he said, I'm always an alcoholic, and so I show up at AA meetings because that is what it takes for me to maintain my sobriety. And I think as we are working through a lot of these issues, we have to stay in constant communication with each other and stay in touch with people or activities that keep us centered and grounded, because we are always fighting against these things on a regular basis. And so being in contact, finding those people that we trust to have these dialogues with, talking with a therapist, and then make some new friends. Get some people outside of your circle that you can call friend and start to learn as much as you can and share, because there is power in sharing and learning from each other.
Dr. Holcomb.
Yeah, I mean, all the plugs for therapy, I'm here for it. That's always my number one go-to. I think as women of color, we hold so much of the strength and of the trauma as well. And so it's so important for us to have our communities that uplift us, but also have our safe space, which could be in therapy, to be able to recharge, to be able to let some of the load off, because we do carry so much. And so we need to let go of some of it. We need to recharge in order for us to continue staying connected within our communities, showing up for our kids, showing up for our partners, just mothering our generations, right? And so I think that therapy is so incredibly important, and it's an untapped resource for communities of color. And we're recognizing that it doesn't have to be, that this can be a safe, rejuvenating space for women of color. And I absolutely think that everyone should go and, utilize this space to heal, to just, like I said, let your load off and to learn new ways of coping, of parenting, of interacting in your communities, of just showing up unapologetically you and feeling safe to do that. Therapy is a space to help you process and learn and grow. And so I will say, if you haven't gone to therapy before, you don't know how to find a therapist, you can go to Therapy for Black Girls is a directory that's great. It has a list of lots of therapists of color. So if you're interested in having a therapist that looks like you, that's a very great resource. There's also Clinicians of Color. That's another registry that you can find a clinician who looks like you. There's also Therapy for Black Men as well. If you have men in your life who might be resistant to going to therapy, but would be open if it is a therapist who looks like them. And then just a more general, widely used directory is Psychology Today. And through all of those resources, you will be able to find a therapist that you can connect with and that can help support you on this healing journey.
So Dr. Landor, I want you to comment as well, but I want to put a little bit of a carrot out there for you. We're resilient. We've talked about that. We are Black women and we are women and we are everything to everybody. We fill everybody's cup. That's what we do, from the boardroom to the bedroom. We've learned to mask and rise above it at work. But our organizations, our internal family structures, the church tells us to pray. What's your comment here as we think through how do we move forward and how do we heal, but how do we help this conversation on all of those levels?
Yeah, what the main thing that I was thinking was to acknowledge, find, renew our Black joy, or our people of color joy. That so often, and I think about the past year, we've all been through so much, let alone generationally speaking, what we've been through as Black women, as women of color. And oftentimes missing in our story is the joy that we have when we're talking to our girlfriends, when we are just kick back, laughing, dancing, right? When we are really in tune with each other, that community that's been talked about. But oftentimes we don't label it as our joy. Even Black Twitter is a joyful place in many ways. And so I would say that for all of us, as you go to therapy, as you really do try to make, we're talking about this on an individual level first, but when we do kind of think about how do we help ourselves, and sometimes it's just to find that joy, or the joy that you have already when you go to the cookout, recognize that and be proud of that. If you've ever Googled, at least definitely a few months ago, when I was trying to just Google Black joy, it was hard to find happy Black people on Google. And that's a problem, because we are happy people, right? That's how we have survived this long, is through the struggle, we still find joy and power in that joy. And so I would encourage all of us that despite all what's going on, that we have to continue to maintain and find our joy. And then really at the institutional level, we need to, as Kim and as Jamila said too, that we need to find those allies and really push them to speak up, right? If you want to be my friend, but you can't speak up when it matters, then what are we really doing here? And I think that's really the way. People of color can't change this country or this world by ourselves. We need allies to not just have the conversation with us, but to actually do something, right? Take action, do the work. So I would encourage all of us in our own spaces to really push folks who are our supports and our allies to speak up, because that's really how change happens.
So you guys have been leading the charge for others. How do you fill your own cups? What are you doing to keep your joy, Dr. Lanor, keep your balance, speak your truth to help heal yourself so you can continue to do this work for others?
Yeah, well, so for me, all the time, I try to find my joy, in part because not only am I teaching courses on race, my research is on race. I experience life as a woman of color in a place where there's not a whole lot of people of color here. And so for me, I find my joy in just so many ways, from the simplest things, which could be conversations between girlfriends or my sorority sisters about something crazy that happened on Twitter or something crazy that happened in the world, to taking a trip by myself. Although, you know, that's some privilege to say, but taking a trip by myself without any distractions and just sitting and being in a bathtub by myself, right? And so I think in whatever ways you can find to have your peace, because as we mentioned before, oftentimes Black women carry that burden of being a super Black woman, when we don't have to do that. Let's not do that. And find those small ways to really have your joy in spite of the hell that's around you.
Thank you. That's powerful. And like you said, just being, sometimes we don't understand just being. It could be being in a park. It could be being in a walk through a park. It could be being at the poolside, just being. Thank you. That's powerful. I know you two ladies have small kids. So how do you balance that? And how do you find your own joy and fill your cups?
Go ahead, Kim.
Well, so I have 3 little ones, and finding that time to be can be very challenging, especially during the pandemic. I think I am learning to find it where I can. For a lot of times for me, it's in the car. It's a car ride. I'm listening to audiobooks. I love me a good fiction. I will, listen to those audiobooks. Sometimes on a Friday, it's a glass of wine and a charcuterie board with my husband once the kids are asleep. On the weekend, it's hanging out with my girlfriends and watching TV, especially now that we're all vaccinated. We can come back together now and feel comfortable. I want to travel more. Antoinette, I wish I could go and travel more. I think I'm committed to doing a lot more of that, especially post-pandemic, and seeing more of the world, because I think that has a way of grounding you and also liberating you all at the same time. So a good book, some wine and cheese, and a good night's sleep.
Dr. Holcomb, close us out.
Yeah, I will say I'll echo Kim in that it's very challenging. My daughter is 2, so I've been struggling with this newish identity of becoming a mom. But I do love a glass of wine on a Friday night. I do love to exercise and to try to find, time to go on a solo walk, or, a late night yoga video or something like that. I also love to travel. My husband and I are going to Aruba next month. So this will be our first trip as a couple since we became parents. And so I do think that's really important, is to just have individual time, if you are a partner, to have couple time. And then also I love enjoying time with my family as a whole, and just disconnecting from work, disconnecting from social media, the news, and just, really being present in and with the people who bring me a lot of joy. And so I've been getting in touch with all the latest Disney movies with my daughter, and just spending really good quality time with people who energize me and refuel my soul.
Ladies, this has been a powerful conversation. I felt it important for our audience to see you for the professionals and the powerful women that you are, the work that you do, as well as the human side, who you are, because we've all been through trauma this past year. And as you said, it didn't start just this past year. It's been a part of who we are. And sometimes we internalize it and we don't even realize how much trauma we've experienced until we have these very powerful conversations. So I thank you. I thank you. I thank you. I thank all of you for sharing your knowledge with us, educating us, and hopefully inspiring and motivating us to continuing this powerful dialogue, as you said, Dr. Allen, with our mamas, with our sisters, with our significant others, all of our girlfriends. But let's go outside of our circle and talk to those people we don't know as well. Challenge ourselves to listen with our heads and our hearts, and to continue to try to transform and heal us, all of us, collectively, as you said, Dr. Allen, because that's who we are. So with that, I thank you. I thank you for coming to the Sister Covenant. This won't be the last invite. So don't block my calls, y'all, because we're going to continue this very powerful, powerful conversation. And as always, thank you. Thank you for joining the Sister Covenant, and be brilliant, be bold, be brave, my sisters, because you all are, and you're beautiful, and be blessed.